At the movies, I know it's a little crazy, the idea of having movies and church together. It seems like two opposites that really shouldn't go together, that they don't mix, like putting chocolate syrup on a hot dog or something like that. That just doesn't go together. But let me give you the principle behind why we're doing At the Movies. It's because when Jesus ministered on earth, for the 3 years that he ministered on earth, he spoke in parables. So what a parable is a story with a bigger point or value to it. And so what he did is he told stories to make people realize and think about things in a different light, in a different manner, and to communicate the message of the gospel, right? And so in the same way, we want to do that through movies, because a movie is just a story with a bigger point, supposed to move your heart towards something. Because if they can make you go to the movies and pay almost $11 for a ticket and $20 for a bucket of popcorn, which aren't you glad we didn't charge $20 for a bucket of popcorn today in the house? My gosh, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Anyways, no, we want obviously if you pay for it, it's moving your heart towards something. You really want to see the movie. And so the reason why we're doing this is because they're modern day parables. And so Jesus, when he spoke a lot about agricultural terms. Just be honest. Look, I'm in Jordans, I'm in skinny jeans, and I'm in a plaid shirt. And I really like my hair to stay the way that it is. So I'm not worried about having green thumbs. Like that's okay. That was for Jesus. And me and Jesus have that relationship. We respect that. So if I was coming here to talk about fig trees, the majority of us, let's be honest, wouldn't know what in the world that's all about. So we're going to talk about these from a modern perspective. So what Jesus did is he redeemed culture for the sake of the kingdom. And that's what we're doing with these movies. So today, our goal this entire summer is to build your faith and encourage you to become a world changer. And so today, we'll be pulling some spiritual principles from the movie I Am Legend. If you guys have seen the movie, you know it's a fantastic movie. Just going to throw this out there. We didn't put any of the scary parts in the movie, so don't worry about jumping. If your kids are in here, I promise it's safe. This is more like at a PG level today, so it is very, very good. So if you guys haven't seen this movie, the protagonist of our movie, played by Will Smith, is Robert Neville. He's a military scientist who has dedicated his life to curing a deadly virus. So let's see our story as it begins. Today's story obviously begins with a tragedy, and we find out that upon the outbreak of a deadly virus that they deemed that would cure cancer, Robert chooses to stay behind in New York City at what was ground zero for the outbreak, and try to find a cure to save all of humanity. But in the process of trying to do what he saw was right, what he felt was right, what he felt moved to do, he lost his daughter and he lost his wife in a tragic accident. But isn't it like life to hit you really hard when you decide to follow after what God is directing you to? And doesn't it seem like the worst part of our lives often come out after the greatest victories and the greatest moments that we think we have? So before we go any further today, I just want to come in agreement with you that we are real people we were real people with real God, with real problems, serving a real God. There is no one perfect in this house, and there is no one who has either you haven't experienced something tragic in your life before, or you're going through something tragic currently right now. And so I want you to let you know that today it's a safe place. Today, this is a safe place for you to express your emotion. Today is a safe place for you to express your emotion not only in here, but to God and to talk to God today. We're going to have an opportunity to do that. But we can't always, so the whole course of this summer so far has been, encourage you and let's build you and let's build. Now, the whole goal for this summer. And so there's moments in our lives where we feel like Joshua, where we feel like God has called us. So God called Joshua right after Moses to lead the Israelites, and then Joshua saw victory after victory after victory after victory. Joshua even prayed once. He prayed a prayer that caused the sun to stand still for an entire day. It's never again happened in the course of humanity. The sun stood still in the sky so the Israelites could defeat the enemy. But I've come today to ask you, what happens when you pray those kind of prayers and God does not answer you? There are moments in our lives that we feel like this, that we pray this powerful prayer and we feel like we're on track with God and we feel like we're on course with God, and we pray these prayers and then nothing. and it seems like God is not listening. But I think there's no better story in the Bible to illustrate than that of Lazarus. And if you guys don't know who Lazarus is, Lazarus was actually considered one of Jesus' closest friends here on earth. So let's read about it and see what happens in John chapter 11. So a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. So this is the Mary who later poured out the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. So the two sisters, they sent a message to Jesus telling him, "Lord, your dear friend is very sick." But watch what Jesus does. He says, and when Jesus heard about it, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened to the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this." All right, sounds pretty encouraging, Jesus. So although Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. And then he said to his disciples, he said, "Finally, let's go back to Judea." This does not sound like the Jesus that we know and love. His dear friend sent him a message to say, "Hey, Lazarus is sick." And Jesus is like, "Oh, no biggie. He's not going to die. Let's go on our way. Let's go to Judea. Let's go away from Bethany. And then he won't die." But let's actually see what happens. We'll skip a couple verses, and then we go down to our next section. It says, "Then he said, our friend Lazarus," this is Jesus talking to the disciples. So they finish up what they're doing in Judea, and this is what Jesus says. He says, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up." And the disciples said, "Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll soon get better." Isn't that like human thinking? Is that when we sleep and we rest, we get better? They thought Jesus meant that Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant that Lazarus had actually died. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead." And he answers again in a very just different way. "And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come and let's go see him." Can you imagine the expression on the disciples' faces? This man was supposed to be your friend, and you come out and say he's dead, and I'm glad I wasn't there. I thought you said, Jesus, that he wasn't going to die, that his sickness would not be unto death. But can you even more importantly imagine the expression of Mary and Martha, where they were back at in Bethany? They were all friends to Jesus. Jesus was their, like we all wear these shirts that says, "Jesus is my homie." Jesus was really their friend. They walked with him, they talked with him, they dined with him. But I think it's easy to slip in moments of tragedy and blame and wonder and question why things happen. Why and how and what now seem to be the prevailing questions when the sun goes down in our own lives. So after 3 years, we find that Robert and his dog Sam are left in a vacant New York City. He thinks that he's the only person left after this viral outbreak. So every day we see that Robert has a routine, that he does the same things. He has breakfast with Sam. He goes hunting and he goes gathering. He scavenges from houses. He works in his lab. He goes to the video store, and occasionally he hits golf balls off an aircraft carrier. Eat, sleep, repeat. Eat, sleep, repeat. We find in the last part of this clip that Robert even broadcasts a message of hope, living in the aftermath of what happened. He ends the message with this: "You are not alone." And aren't those some of the most comforting words that we can hear? You are not alone. Because right in the middle of our own tragedies, it often feels like that's the loneliest times in our life. And I find that Mary and Martha must have felt very alone after Lazarus has passed away. The three of them were considered very dear friends to Jesus according to the scripture. They knew who he was. They knew that he was the Messiah, and they knew he had all the power. But how could this happen? They had sent news to Jesus that Lazarus was sick. He still died. In the aftermath of the greatest trials and the pain that we will face in our life, I often think that we are like Robert in the sense that we try to keep busy to keep our mind off of the pain and off of the sorrow, that we try distracting ourselves from what failed to happen and occupy our thinking space with something else. You see, Mary and Martha did this because they took Lazarus, they dressed him in his grave clothes, they put the ointments on him, and they put the spices on him, and they brought him to the grave. They got him ready for the grave. So by distracting ourselves, we actually create noise where we can fail to hear what Jesus really said and what he's trying to do behind the scenes. Robert seems to find that there's no victory for his mission, that everything that he tries again and again and again, he can't find a cure for the virus, and his routine is starting to show nothing for it. We see in the second half of the clip that he's actually bearing some pretty heavy emotions in his video journal. I think the final statement of his broadcast to the world, that if you're out there, if anybody's out there, please, you're not alone, is no longer a broadcast sent out to people that there's hope, but it's an encouragement to himself to try to say, you know what? I'm not alone anymore. And if we can be real Christians today and take off the mask, is that our job as Christians or as followers of Jesus or disciples or however you want to say it, is that we're supposed to be his hands and feet, and we're supposed to be the mission and the mission critical vehicle to bring his vision to this world. But what happens when we're supposed to be hope dealers, and oftentimes we feel like there's no hope for us anymore? That we go and it feels like we serve and we do, and if we're honest with ourselves, we have moments where we question, we're like, why, Jesus, why? I serve, I do what I'm supposed to. I gave up everything. Just like Robert gave up everything. He gave his family so he could try to save the world. And I feel like sometimes we're in the same boat, then rather we're trying to do what is right, but it's to keep ourselves together from falling apart and falling into insanity. Faith and hope can be hard in times like these. So watch what happens when we go back to the story in John. Picking up here, it said, Martha said to Jesus, so Jesus has now gone back to Bethany. He's taken the journey back, and he's 4 days later, after Lazarus has died, and Martha meets Jesus right when he gets there. Mary stays back. It said, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. And so Jesus tries to move to a moment of faith and encouragement and hope. And watch what she says. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. And Jesus told her this. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am the life, that anyone that believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? She says, yes, Lord, she told him, I have always believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. You see, in this moment, her faith actually sounded more like certainty at this point of the story. She was more convinced that Lazarus would rise in the last day when the Lord came back with the trump and the sound than Lazarus would rise in this moment. Because Jesus had already stated previously in this story what would happen, that this would all happen for his glory. But can I tell you this morning that your doubt is not the enemy to your faith? Because if you have doubt, you have space for God to work. God can defy the doubt. But when you lock yourself into certainty that this is it, this is the end, what you do, you kill your faith that God can still move and God can still work. And what happened is Martha had got to the point, she was beyond the death and she was beyond the doubt. And she said, you know what? I am certain this is it. The story's done. I will see my brother Lazarus on the other side of heaven's gates. But watch now what the other sister said. It said, when Mary arrived and saw Jesus, so this is afterwards, they're almost to the graveside at this point, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. It sounds like the sisters did a lot of talking about their certainty. It said when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing around her because a large crowd had gathered there at this point, it said that a deep anger welled up inside of Jesus, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? he asked them, and they told him, Lord, come and see. And watch this. This is one of the only times in Scripture that Jesus wept. Then Jesus wept. He cried. He mourned. He mourned for Lazarus, but I think he was mourning for more. Let's watch what happens in the story. It said the people who were standing nearby and said, see how much he loved him, talking about how much Jesus loved Lazarus, that he's crying for him. But some said, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? And Jesus was still angry when he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. Mary was certain that if Jesus would have been there earlier, Jesus, if you would have showed up in my situation earlier, Jesus, if you would have done this, or you would have done this, and you would have done this. It's in my certainty that I put a block and I put a limit on God from moving and working in my situation. Both of the sisters were certain about Lazarus' death, that this was it. They were in agreement with that. They were certain about that. They were beyond the point of their doubt. But if you're here today and you feel like you're at the same point in your life and you're at the same point in your faith journey, can I tell you that Jesus is still wanting to move and he's still wanting to work on your behalf. It doesn't matter if that we get to a point of certainty. It doesn't take God's ability away, because your faith can still move and your faith can still work. Just because the sun has seemed to set on your story, it does not mean that dawn isn't on its way. When I first watched this movie back in 2009 when it came out, I thought it was the coolest movie ever because it was just action-filled and it was awesome, and I really like Will Smith. But I watched this movie the other day and I cried my eyeballs out because I'm all teared up now. It's because this is not a movie about zombies, or this is not a movie about a post-apocalyptic world, but it's a movie about faith and humanity. Because what we see is, we see a man who dedicated himself to a mission, and he paid it all so he could try and do and follow after what he thought was right, was to reverse the virus and save the remaining people in the world. And he paid everything for it. And finally, someone came along, Anna and her son Ethan, in a moment, and actually saved his life. And yet, finally, when after broadcasting message after day in and day out and repeating routine after routine after routine, even when a spark of hope came along, it didn't do anything for him, because he stood there and he told her, everything you said is wrong. God is not real. This plan is not real. All hope is lost. There is no one left in the world. But against his own logic, if there was no one left in the world, Anna and her son would not have shown up. But in a moment of clarity, when finally the dark seekers had figured out where he lived, they came and invaded his home. And in that final scene, they're in the lab, and he finally figures out a cure. And the reason why he doesn't go and he shuts them in that bomb shelter in the end, and he goes and he gives his life. He kills all the dark seekers in the building. It's because he has a moment of clarity that his life is not his own. His story is not his own. And because of him, the rest of the world got a chance at survival. That small colony at Bethel, you heard it say in the end, we are his legacy, and this is his legend. And I wonder how many of us are like that. That we've got so in the routine of doing things because of tragedy, because of pain, because of hurt, because of sorrow in our life, because someone wounded us. That we're so stuck in a routine that we've created so much noise that we don't even hear the voice of God anymore. And Satan has convinced us that almost to a point that, you know what? Your God's not real. He's not capable of healing your body. He's not capable of healing your loved one. He's not capable of moving in your finances. He's not capable of helping you at school. He's not capable of helping you overcome your drug addiction or your pornography addiction. He's not able to help you right where you're at. He can't heal your emotions. He can't do anything. And you get stuck and you get alone, and all you can hear in your head is the noise of the enemy till you're convinced, even when hope comes along, that God's not real and he can't help me. It doesn't matter the experiences you have with God, because what you've done is you've locked yourself in a moment. But watch what happens when Jesus gets to the grave of Lazarus. He gets to the grave in verse 39 here in the story, and he says, roll the stone aside. But Martha, the dead man's sister, she protested. And now Jesus is at a place, and she already knows, and she's already declared in the scripture that you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God, that whatever you ask, God will do. And he shows up at the grave. And she's like, no, Jesus, don't open the door. He's going to stink. It's been 4 days, and it's going to smell terrible. But Jesus responds to her. He says, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if only you believed? And so the people around him listen. They listen to Jesus, and they roll the stone aside. And then Jesus looked up at the heaven, and he said, Father, thank you for hearing me, that you always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so they will see that then they will believe that you sent me. And then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out of the grave. And I imagine what the people gawking in awe and wonder that, Jesus, you were 4 days late. You failed, Jesus. He was supposed to be the hope of the world. He was the Messiah. These people, the Israelites, had been praying for thousands of years. And their only hope, it looked like, failed him. And as they rolled the stone away and the smell was coming out of the grave, he simply looks death in the face and says, come out. And so a dead man comes out, his hands and his feet bound in his grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. You know what I see from this story is that Mary and Martha are so wrapped up in their certainty, they fail to see and understand who God is. He tells them that I am the resurrection and I am the life. And what they had seen before is that Jesus was a healer, but he's like, I want to show you more than that I am not just a healer, but I am the resurrection and I am the life. And I will stare death in the face. I will look right into your situation. I will look right into your addiction. I will look right into your broken family. I will look right into your hurt. And I will look right into your pain. And I will say, get up and come out of your grave. I don't know who this is for in this house this morning. I don't know the situation that you walked in and the brokenness that you walked in this morning. And if it's for one person, I am here today, and God has sent me to tell you that it is not over until he says it's over. You are not alone in your situation. You are not alone in your heartbreak. You are not alone in your pain. This past 2 weeks has been a living hell for me. If you guys didn't know, Case and I were in a car accident. A lady hit us going 50 when we were at a standstill. I'm 25, and I've been in more pain now than I've been in my whole life. I can't lift my arms above my head barely. Now I'm up here, I'm in pain standing on this stage. But miracle number one is that I walked away from that accident. Every x-ray person said, your bones should be broken. My knee hit the dashboard. I crossed the dashboard and just I smoked the wheel with my chest. And then we hit the car in front of us and whipped back. My neck's out of place right now, and it's not how it should be. I'm 25, it shouldn't be like this. But miracle one, I walked away. So you know how insurance companies are. I'm sorry if you work for an insurance company. I still love you. God still loves you. But they try to give me next to nothing for my car. And so Angela and I were so excited because next year our car would be paid off and we would get out of debt. And so now we're trying to figure out what are we going to do. We have to go back into debt to get another car. And then guess what? We only had 2 days to do it because the insurance company was taking away our rental. Go figure. And so between all the pain, between trying to figure out, me and Angela we're still learning each other. We're still trying to figure it out at home. And she's constantly trying to tell me to sit down, stop doing that, because I'm just a busybody, but I can't do it right now. We go to the bank, and the bank says, sorry, we don't do those small of loans for cars. You have to go to a dealership. It has to be under 70,000 miles, and we just don't want to go into that kind of debt right now. But you know what happens when we walk out of the bank? We get a phone call, and it's one of my friends. He says, I got some news you want to hear. He says, my parents called me, and they want to give you a car. They want to give you a car paid off, so you don't have to worry about anything. I don't tell you that to bring glory to our situation or even to who those people are, but I'm telling you God is still real. And even 2,000 years later, I'm sorry if that's not a big miracle to you, but I walked away from a car accident that I shouldn't have, and then God provided a vehicle that I have no right, that costs more than my car, and that was better than our car ever was. And why am I telling you that? It's because God can still stare in the face of death. God can still stare in the face of your certainty. And so say, I am able, I am capable, I am the resurrection, and I am the life. And so this morning, I don't know who this is for, and so I don't want to single anybody out, so I'm going to ask you, will you step out of where you're at, and can we all join around the front as a family? Can we come and pray together as a family? Maybe you're not walking through anything right now. Maybe you're not in the middle of tragedy, but someone next to you might be. There's a first-time guest in this house, and you might be struggling with something. You've come to this place looking for hope, and you've come to this place looking for something real. Or maybe you've been walking with Jesus for a while, and you're at a point that you don't even know if you can serve Jesus one more day. Can I tell you, God is here, and God is in this house, and whatever you need, He is willing to look at the face of the grave and say, come on, come out of your grave. Come on, come out of your situation. Lazarus, where are you at today? Lazarus, where are you in your situation?